enemies into black holes, Bentley can freeze enemies entirely, and Daxter just kinda shits on people. I can see a green mist of some description. What else could it be? Toxic fumes? Exactly, that's what I'm saying. No, toxic fumes like insect killer. Remember? Daxter on PSP? Bug extermination? Remember? I'm still trying to forget. Hey, come on, man, this is boring. Let me play the main character for a change. Okay, sure. I'll play as Daxter and you can be Dark Jack, shooting eco-energy at people. Are you happy now? No, this is nothing like how I remember it. Well, get your memory checked, mate. It's so much more fun playing co-op. Yeah, for you. Oh, are you kidding me? I thought we were having a good time here, and now you want to moan about it? Because last time I played this, I was in your position, and it was a lot of fun. But being player one's bitch isn't what I signed up for. Can you give me a health item, please? Nah, you know what? You're on your own. Oh, come on, it's not that bad. At what point in time did I start being such a sour bitch? Start? Like I was saying, progression in this game is a major deterrent for me. Why not just open up Haven City in Paris quickly so I can jump between the different areas instead of only playing in the Ratchet theme and then only playing in the Jack universe and saving Sly until the very end? By the time you get out of Metropolis, every single game mode has been conquered multiple times over. Makes everything after that feel incredibly boring and samey. The objectives of these events differ as well. We've got the general survival modes, they're usually the most enjoyable with lots of combat. Other times we need to protect 3 different bodies on the map from incoming attacks. These can get pretty hectic depending on how big the map is. There is no jumping in this game, classic pet peeve of mine, particularly since we've got 3 characters known for platforming. However, we do have these buttons to stand on that spring you about the map. It makes the larger areas easier to traverse, which does help. One of the most common goals is finding a certain number of fans hidden within the level and smashing their cages to set them free. This is an objective that gets applied to every single type of gameplay, but it never gets tired as it's a fun treasure hunt mode. Right up my alley. Likewise, we've got that same objective, but we have to bring all of the fans back to the centre of the map within the time limit. Again, very enjoyable. But then other events that want you to collect crystals to launch these rockets can be painstakingly slow and quite uneventful at times. And while the treasure hunt modes are applied to the frisbee golf gimmick as well, we're really just steering something around the map. You can get to higher ground and explore for more ammunition, but that's about it. At least you're not trapped in a single position like with bowling. I am surprised how much they're able to get from such small environments, but they get old pretty quick, and some areas only offer one type of mode. Hidden throughout are collectible items, golden bolts, precursor orbs, and golden coins. Collecting enough of each set only unlocks some extra outfits, most of which raise even more questions. So you'll put Ratchet's prison garments in before his armor from Gladiator? So, speaking of Gladiator, or Deadlocked if you'd prefer, when do I actually review Ratchet and Clank? Please, don't even go there.
Being mutants are dangerous. We know.
Completing an area unlocks a new cutscene that progresses the story along. You might not be surprised to learn these are more enjoyable than everything else here most of the time. It's just so much fun seeing these characters interact and slowly learn that their being here isn't all it seems. Lump here is voiced by Chaos from Skylanders. I think if this game had have gone for the more cooperative style Skylanders adopted, it would have been a lot more enjoyable for both players. That's all a crossover like this needs to be. Just give us what we love from the originals mixed in together. It's so sad that we don't even get the villains from these series either. I understand that it's trying not to take place during any particular timelines, but even Crash and Spyro Fusion got that part right. Although, not really. The only things that actually make it over from these series are the main heroes, their special collectibles, a couple of weapons, and recognisable elements of their environments. That's it. We spend the entire game killing the same 5 enemies, which, in fairness, do look like Crimson Guard robots from the Jack series, but that's really it. This feels more like its own thing rather than a combination of these 3 properties. I'm trying to like this game, but it's hard when all I want to do is run around and smash things without having to do all this other crap. If the game is going to be so linear, why force me to do the same mode 3 times in a row, you bastard? I just don't flippin' get it. Alright, calm down there before you blow us all to shit. Step back and let someone with experience teach you a few things. It's incredibly hard to try and discredit this game, given how well the motion controls function. Even all these years later, I'm still surprised at how fluent everything is. Yes, some of the applications of these controls are for modes we're not big on, but you can't deny the quality. Take away the idea of what could have been, focus on what we've got to play here, and you'll quickly start to understand. The gameplay you're familiar with is here, expanded upon with the control scheme. Environment themes are accurate, along with the characteristics of our heroes themselves. And the soundtrack and general presentation is actually really good, especially for what is just a party game. It may be a party game instead of an action-adventure game, but that shouldn't detract from its accomplishments. I wouldn't doubt for a second that these franchises were added in purely for the sake of having something immediately recognisable to market, but Nihilistic still did a decent job making that work within the context of this game and the individual IPs. And I mean, come on, a party game with a story mode? It might be a little generic, but I still think it does what it needs to. You do make a good point, but I can't help but argue the story. Look, if you don't mind, we're up to the end game now, so this is where I take over. I know you're confused, but trust me, we've already done this before. What did you do? I don't know! Well, this is going to add a whole new level of realism to the combat. Hey-ya! Bloody idiot! Once we complete Paris, we're transported to Gleebertopia, where our heroes quickly learn that the fans we've been rescuing all game are actually prisoners. This planet used to be their home until Gleeber and Lunk forced them to mine all the crystals, leaving the planet a hollow mess. This plot is kind of similar to the original Ratchet and Clank.
Thank you.
Sam and Drek building
Appreciate
his own
that.
planet from pieces of others he destroys. It's not the worst concept ever, I just wish we had more glimpses of it through the rest of the game.
Labor Day. Enjoy friends and family on everything at Raymore and Flanagan. 15 to 20%.
These crystals power a warp gate the bad guys plan to enter and access the worlds of our heroes to assume their roles and take over. So it's time to stop them. The final course of action is a series of trials through the desolate wastes, with each character getting their time to shine. Ratchet masters the flame whip, Clank kinda shoots some things, and Bentley, again, just kind of shoots some things. For the final time today, why doesn't Jack get to shoot anything? He's stuck with the chore of rolling bloody balls around all day. What a mismatch. And yes, what a chore. That leaves the final challenge, the big finale of the entire game, with Daxter and his signature frisbee. These final challenges are okay, but nothing new to the formula, and once all the fun combat is over with, the entire Big Finish feel is completely lost. Having passed all the challenges and shut down the evil guy's machine, the villains attempt some docking maneuver and get sent packing. What more did you expect? Our heroes return to their home worlds right back where they left off. Ratchet avoids being crushed, Jack and Daxter commence their high-speed collision, and Sly falls flat on his face. Why am I not surprised? Daxter snobs the other sidekicks, and the credits roll. I hate to say it, but there is more character personality on display in the credits than there is through the entire game. That's the one disappointing feeling you're left with after playing this. The sad fact that these characters were incredibly underutilized throughout the entire game. But hang on, you were praising the shit out of this a moment ago, because I didn't want to see you shit all over this thing. Because I know I wanted to, back when I personally came out of the game mostly satisfied, the game itself is no more than an average experience. Yes, I feel much the same way. Even though the game can get quite repetitive, the gameplay is still really fun. I had such a blast running around as these characters, but why they added some of these modes, I'll never know. The entire game could have just been the running and gunning with some more interesting levels, and I'd have been so much more into it. But instead, we get a continuous loop of the less interesting mechanics shoehorned in for the gimmick. All that's left to do after the game are some diamond replicas of challenges we've already attempted, so this really is a strictly linear adventure with not much else on offer. And while the game stands on its own merits, its failures at a balanced cooperative mode and misusing these franchises means I probably won't be back for some time. PlayStation Move Heroes gets 5 out of 10. All the fans of Sly 2 just flipped their shit, but no joking, this was so much more bearable to sit through. And while the glaring issues and puzzling decisions do greatly detract, for a heavily gimmicked motion control game with the pop-in, pop-out playstyle, it is one of the most solid examples of these mechanics.
Daxter franchise is one that I hold very close, ever since I bought my PS2 when I was 8 years old, along with a copy of Jak 2 and other games we never speak of. Still being very much into colourful, cartoon-style games, the attitude displayed by all of the cool, stylised characters, contrasted by the gritty dystopian themes of the world, was my first taste of the transition video games were seeing at the time into a more mature form of entertainment. So it's no wonder that the imagery and memories have stayed with me for so long. So, after hearing all of that feel-good, warm and fuzzy backstory, it really makes me wonder how I could suck so bad at reviewing these games in the past. So, it's time to fix that. Back in mid-2015, just a few months into reviewing games on a regular basis, I decided to cover the Jak and Daxter series, videos that have haunted me ever since. I was not happy with them at the time. The quality was just a mess, and the biggest piss-off is that I said a bunch of stupid shit that made no sense. And those scores, Jesus Christ. I spent the entire Jak 3 review discussing my newfound disappointment with the game, which was my genuine first time feeling that way, but, fuck it. 7 out of 10. These old videos have been on my shit list for the longest time. I just had no experience back then. But things have certainly changed. Now, I wasn't planning on making this revisit episode, but I found myself returning to the games for the 5-year anniversary of those old reviews, so I figure, why not give them a second look, for old time's sake. This is actually my first time playing the PS3 HD Remaster, which we all know is an amazing title that was handled with such care by mass media. Better care than all of the subsequent re-releases since, that's for sure. So let's not waste any more time and jump into Jak and Daxter, the Precursor Legacy. My favourite aspect of this series has always been the character and lore that fleshes out the beautiful and mysterious world. The introduction to this adventure is still one of the best ever, in my opinion, at establishing the important personality traits, motives, and teasing our main villains without a true introduction, which is important for later on. I must say, seeing Geyser Rock in full HD made me very excited to revisit this trilogy. I honestly haven't touched any of these games in about 5 years since I last covered them on the channel. Back then, I was still adjusting to looking at everything through an impartial, critical lens, whereas now, I'm just an old fan returning home. Wow, that sounded really lame. Anyway, Naughty Dog's flawless ability to pull off a fully open environment with no loading screens set such an example at the time that it took several years for other studios to catch up. We'd only just seen the grey, blocky Liberty City in GTA 3 a few months earlier, with loading screens all over the place. Now suddenly, we've got beaches and forests, underwater cities, volcanoes and snowy mountains, all in immense detail with no loading screens. These games released within 2 months of each other. Like, whoa, that's an insane detail to think about. While there was a mainstream shift at the time into what's become known as the modern open world game, thanks to the likes of GTA 3, the tried and tested collectathon format of the previous generation worked in Jak and Daxter's favour in many ways. Having such vibrant locations calls for interesting objectives that the game sets up well for hours on end. For example, hey dude, bring my news home to me and I'll give you a power cell. Okay, sure, where is it? It's on Misty Island, bro. Okay, well, how do I get there? No idea, dude. You're the one who's like playing the game. You figure it out. So then you venture off down a pathway after randomly bumping into someone else and helping them out. And suddenly, you find yourself entering an entirely new location. Okay, well, let's explore around here for a bit, fix some more stuff that actually has an effect in other areas nearby. Now you stumble into the fisherman, complete his mini-game, and, oh, by the way, would you like to use my boat to reach Misty Island so you can find the muse to bring back to that guy for a power cell? Oh, you forgot about that, didn't you? Because that was an hour ago, and this game is like a time warp that just sucks you into exploration. Well, now go and do that over and over again. The precursors must have been dark magicians, because I have no idea how this game is effortlessly and consistently able to just constantly draw you into the next adventure. And by offering additional rewards for collectible items is another excellent way to encourage scanning these levels over and over. Now, of course, this does create one problem that every collectathon has suffered from since the dawn of time. Where the fuck is that final precursor orb? We saw in Spyro the Dragon the unlockable ability to use sparks as a tool to point towards items you may have missed. Come on, Daxter, you lazy rat, help a gamer out here. And as much as I love these locations, the clean sweep shatters any concept of ever returning to them once the game is over. Thank God this thing is so highly replayable, even when being incredibly easy, which, admittedly, can make some aspects like the boss fights kind of uninteresting. This is such an animated and funny game with so many great moments that I honestly don't mind it being on the easier side. It makes it easy to jump in because you don't need to focus hard on anything. One aspect I do wrestle with every time I play though are definitely the zoomer segments. They did a good job not going too overboard with it only appearing in a select few locations, and the vehicle controls well enough. It's just that precursor basin that gets me every time. There are a lot of irritating missions here, like chasing these animals until they go back underground. Is there even a path or pattern that they follow? I can stay on their ass for ages and they just never decide to reach the end goal. The objectives in most levels are fairly self-explanatory and usually center on Jack's movement abilities rather than anything else, learning how to use the basic functions to successfully make it through the levels. But this shit is just nonsensical. There is also a level of unbalance when it comes to eco abilities. Green and blue eco, used for health and activating items in the world, are primary assets to the adventure and get used constantly. The first time you figure out how to use blue eco to access secret precursor orbs is so awesome. Yellow eco lets you shoot a fireball, which often removes whatever little depth there was to the combat, but it does become an essential tool for use in certain puzzle challenges, so I can give that a pass as situational at times. But on the other hand, we have the red eco that only shows up twice and only dumbs down the combat even further. Seriously, it's pointless. This is just a veteran nitpick on my part, but it's stupid. Most enemies die in 1 or 2 hits anyway, and at least the yellow eco gives you a projectile attack as something different. The only reason I always find myself mentioning this is that the game starts to fall off the rails once you reach the Red Sage's hut. Suddenly, there are less levels to explore compared to the other villages we visit, power cells just get dumped into collection objectives without any actual missions, and just when you think we're being set up to visit 4 different villages, instead, we just get thrusted into the final encounter. The whole missing the 4th chapter is inherent of games that had a rushed development cycle, because they either run out of time or budget and were forced to finish early. And nobody likes to finish early. Now, to be clear, I've never heard of any stories like that in relation to Jack and Daxter, but when we look at similar games like Ty the Tasmanian Tiger that very clearly had an entire 4th area missing from the final game, it's hard not to look at Precursor Legacy and assume the same thing. It does hurt the pace of this game in my opinion, but thankfully, unlike a lot of games, Precursor Legacy actually has a pretty decent closing gauntlet. Using all of the tricks we learned throughout the game, we're tested on our way to rescue the four sages, and the final encounter with Golem Maya, in all of its simplicity, is still an excellent battle. Getting to look back over the adventure we've had really completes this first chapter on our journey, and despite some of its shortcomings, these details become unimportant when you look at the overall love and polish that went into this title. Jak and Daxter the Precursor Legacy gets 8 out of 10. Okay, here we go. It's Jak 2 time, bitches. Strap in and strap on. So you know how I dunked on GTA 3 earlier for being all grey and blocky? Welcome to Haven City. We're pumped full of dark eco, which is definitely not a metaphor for the hormones raging through Jak's body as he grows from a boy into a man on this renegade mission against the establishment in protest of a war or some shit. God damn, there is a lot going on in this game. But good luck getting to see any of it when you get stuck on the fourth fucking mission because you're 8-year-old swear-eyed Jak. Anyway, we will address that later. First, I'd just like to discuss the major elephant in the room here, switching genre. It's a theme we've seen many games of this era adopt in an attempt to stay relevant with the industry. Many fell flat on their face, but all nostalgic bias aside, Jak 2 was one of the better ones. Unfortunately though, it still suffered. Moving from the smaller open locations within the great linear world, now we just have an open world. There are many great places to see within and outside of that, with each offering different set pieces and moments that again stand the test of time thanks to fun gameplay and excellent writing. But it's this open world where Jak 2 suffers greatly. The structure of missions has suddenly adopted the Grand Theft Auto format, with a lot of that classic go here to receive your mission, then drive to here to actually start the mission. And if it's not that, then we've got some other kind of fast driving objective within these cramped hallways that you're trying to pass off as a city. Now, it was designed this way as a workaround for loading the map in real time, which I can appreciate. Unfortunately, however, it suffocates the open world appeal of having a large variety of different paths to take between destinations, as that element is completely lost here. And don't get me wrong, I think the world of Haven City is phenomenal with a dank, immersive atmosphere. But the missions that take place in this location are often the ones that feel like padding, just something to do to pass the time. And along with that, going back to this game is especially strange after years of modern standards when it comes to the open world genre, because this place is vast and empty. Aside from the main story and very limited variety of side quests for orbs, there is absolutely nothing to see here, which for me is the biggest missed opportunity. And I know, it's not fair to compare retro games with the standards that we have almost 20 years later. But if you look at GTA Vice City that was released 12 months prior to Jak 2, that game understood the importance of fleshing out an open world with additional side content, even way back in 2002. So not having any fun to enjoy outside of your main storyline is a real problem here. Thankfully, like I mentioned, there are still a lot of great locations to explore that are all iconic in video game history. And this is where I'd usually attempt to run through some of my personal favourites, but it's almost impossible to rank these levels when they're all so much fun.
Quiet, here comes Pretty Boy.
Until you get stuck. This is the second biggest issue with Jak 2. the difficulty. But only if you're a fucking baby. Listen, okay, I'm not a pro gamer with this thing. In fact, this is only my third time playing through this thing from start to finish. And if I can escort the men through the sewer on my second attempt, then you all must be doing something drastically wrong. But even with that said, I hope you're a fan of lock-in contracts and no checkpoints. Because that's the core problem with this game's brutal spikes in difficulty. It is such a shame, but if you die at any point during any mission, you're forced back to the very start. Now, like I said, the game isn't super difficult as long as you know how to use the tools at your disposal. But sometimes bullshit occurs, and it doesn't really seem fair that it happened in the first place, let alone put you all the way back at the start. Worst off is some of these locations actually trap you in those missions until you're able to complete it, which is not cool. That tank mission I mentioned earlier, that took me a month and 2 full game resets to finally pass that when I was younger, if I remember correctly. And it's only the 4th mission in the game. Any other time you're inside a vehicle like a turret or a mech suit is also concerning, as these things really limit your defensive ability, which is super fun, especially when you just sit there and take damage. But for the most part, I'd have to say that while there are difficulty spikes throughout the course of this adventure, they are manageable if you know what you're doing. And then there's the ambush in the water slums. Fuck! Fuck! Oh, oh my... Fuck! Oh my fucking god! Fuck! Oh, fuck! 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 Yeah, okay. Let's move on before I have a fucking stroke. Looking at this game as a whole, the addition of gun combat doesn't change things too much, as we still get a tidy helping of platforming and exploring to go along with it. But for some reason, the only place you can collect ammunition is at the gun course, which is stupid, and it's almost like they forgot that 2 of the 4 weapons even existed towards the end of the game. But the pace and tone of the narrative is incredibly consistent, with many great moments that definitely stick with you. The time travel aspect introduces such a convoluted timeline of events from this point on in the series, but I just love the calamity of it all, and it's also an interesting point in retrospect to see the evolution of Naughty Dog's storytelling unfold here. In the first game, we saw some evil figures in the beginning that weren't officially introduced until the start of the 3rd act, where we learn that they're the only people who can potentially help Daxter after falling into the Dark Eco. And suddenly, just like that, our goal turns into our enemy. So simple, yet so amazing. And we get to see the next step up with the villains in Jak 2. Baron Praxis is the evil ruler in over his head with the war, Crew, the bloated criminal leader we work for to find our way, and then the metalhead leader who is after the small boy so that he can take over the city. This 3-way dance between the different sides peaks when the true villain emerges, and just in time for the final stage, everyone knows what they're fighting for. It's bloody superb in my opinion. Even in the simplest of cutscenes, you can see the light bulb go off inside Naughty Dog's head as they get the itch to move into a more cinematic style. And the boss encounters over the course of the game are also a substantial improvement over Precursor Legacy, which is awesome. I'm a big fan of the battle in Mars Tomb, personally. It really finishes Act 2 with such an epic scene. While it may struggle with its balance of different gameplay styles and approach to difficulty, this is still an excellent play. But I'm sorry, an 8 out of 10 does go overboard for me. Jak 2 Renegade gets 7 out of 10. And now we've reached Jack 3. I must admit, I'm still quite muddled when it comes to this game. Of the trilogy, it was my sincerest favourite as a kid. Back then and even now, I just love the continued world building, character arcs, and simple yet addicting gameplay mechanics. The addition of the Mad Max-esque wasteland vehicles, while not perfect, was such another big change from Jak 2's core theme, which I just feel fits this trilogy so well. Narrative-wise, the looming threat of bastard precursors from outer space coming to destroy Earth gives everything we do throughout the course of the adventure some weight. But my god, that introduction cinematic. Holy shit. Haven Palace, like I've already talked at length about, is just such an iconic image permanently resting in my mind, with the only thing to top it being the sight of it crumbling to the ground. It has inspired me for so many years now, and if we ever saw a new Jak and Daxter game, I would love to see the time between Jak 2 and 3 with this as a playable level. But also, the mark it leaves on the map is something totally next level. Yes, all we've got to play now is essentially one long snaking hallway, but at the same time, when do you ever get to see an entire location in a franchise turn to rubble and still get to explore it? Holy shit, Naughty Dog, you fucking legends. And with that, the mission structure in the open world improved here by actually using the environment to tell the story of missions, like these walkways, never used in Jak 2. Well, now we have to destroy the enemy turrets on them. And in the desert, this isn't just a cool location for the sake of it. The dunes and sparse, twisted architecture are used to create moments in each mission unique to the player and the path they choose to take, finally achieving that true open world feel. And remember how I mentioned that there was nothing to do beyond missions in the previous game? Well, Jak 3 did a very good job adding in many more additional side challenges and a bloody shitload of collectibles to find. Excellent stuff. It actually gives you a reason to have a look around, especially when it leads to upgrades and other secrets. But I always reach a point when my critical brain can no longer drown out the nagging problems in this game, that being the difficulty, pacing, and overall time. What can I say to really defend this? I'm a fucking Terminator in this game. And sure, the curve of difficulty is much more balanced here than it was in Jak 2, and yes, this game does certainly offer more interesting challenge when compared to Precursor Legacy, but I don't know, it just feels so dumbed down to play this, which really sucks if I'm being honest with you. I mean, come on, we have so many weapons at our disposal in this game that are all devastating when used correctly, and even more devastating when used in combination with the rest of our moveset. It just makes things so easy and even numbing to an extent. But then you realise dominant strategy says that you only need 2 or 3 out of the 12 you're given, which makes this even worse. Right before the big finale, you get the mass inverter, which acts more like a cheat code you mess around with for fun, instead of an actual weapon. And then right after, you get what is only described as a fucking nuke that kills everything. I mean, thanks, but I don't really need it. The Peacemaker is fine, and the Dark Black abilities offer an arsenal of nukes anyway. And they ultimately go unexplored in both games because you rarely have a use for them. If they had just reduced the amount of stuff in this game, it would have given everything a chance to breathe. Or perhaps, instead of throwing new overpowered weapons at you after every mission, make them purchasable within the secrets menu so that you actually have a greater incentive to scavenge for ores. Then you might have to consider, do I buy this upgrade for the gun I already have? Or Should I deal with the game being more difficult while I save up enough for a better gun altogether? Now all of a sudden what you've got is a system that can be played in a variety of ways and gives all of this additional content some purpose. It seems like they might have wanted to do something like this, looking at all of the additional vehicles you can purchase, but the problem is, these just don't serve any actual purpose. They're not stronger or faster. In fact, they can be worse to control in comparison. And again, the vehicles we do unlock by playing, 4 out of the 5 are unlocked within the first act, and only 2 of those actually have any reason being here. The sand shark for your general vehicle stuff, and the dune hopper to access specific locations. It's the same case for the dark and light jack abilities. This entire concept feels forgotten about so much to where even the game has to remind you that, hey, we know you forgot how to do this because we forgot about it too, so here's a tutorial. Even though you just did it a moment ago, here's another tutorial. And while the new Lightjack abilities actually do serve the gameplay with self-healing and flight, which absolutely transforms the collectibles in the open world, the time freezing ability is super situational for the 5 times you need it right after you unlock the ability and then never again. And when it comes to the light shield, I never, ever, ever have a use for this. It's like they wanted to include all of these new mechanics without any rhyme or reason, freaked out when they realised how much random junk they'd added to the game, and just had to unload it all onto you the first chance it got just to get it out there. Which brings me to the pacing. The 3-act structure the second game nailed doesn't feel as balanced here, when the first act is just a relentless dumping of unlockables to make you superpowered. Act 2 would be better if every mission didn't end with another super rare artifact, all one after the other. What are the chances of that? And then Act 3 is on super fast forward mode, only lasting half the time of the others. I do really enjoy a lot of it, but the pace is just a mess. And that right on cue brings me to the tone of this game and where it dies a death. For about 90% of this game, the previously mentioned Darkmaker threat looming and trying to figure out who is leading them is handled incredibly well. Again, we've got multiple villains, and the journey to discover the true villain is an exciting one. But I cannot forgive throwing out all of that impressive world building this series has been so fucking good at just for the single throwaway joke that, oh, these bastard ferrets are basically God, or something. Fuck you. Okay, I'll admit, it does still get a chuckle out of me. I'm not that heartless, but it does make me feel like a bit of a chump for growing so invested in this world over the course of 3 games now. Because this is just embarrassing. Looking across the entire trilogy, while all the games are still very good and highly replayable, they each possess something the other games in the trilogy failed to execute. The first game had excellent gameplay and level structure. The sequel was defined by the excellent narrative and character interaction, while the third game balanced out the difficulty somewhat and offered the best variety to keep things fresh. So with all of that said, I guess I'm pretty down on Jak 3, huh? But not really. Sure, it's absolutely not perfect by any means, but there was clear work put in to improve the open world format, evolve a lot of the new gimmicks Jak 2 introduced, and continue the strong narrative habits. But I just can't look past how unnecessary many of these evolutions feel. With so much additional stuff added in without a clean focus, we find ourselves with a lot of help to dumb down any interesting depth to the gameplay inside of a poorly paced 3-act structure that barely holds itself together until the grand finale spits in your eye. Jack 3 unfortunately gets 6 out of 10. It's important to remember though that a 6 is not even close to being a bad score, but it does represent a lack of polish that the series hadn't seen until this point in time. Now, don't freak out, but I am not planning to revisit Jack X, Baxter, or The Lost Frontier at this point in time. I just wanted to take a more experienced look at a trilogy of games that defined my childhood and helped to lay the foundation for this channel back in the day. And besides, I really don't have much else to add to the discussion about those games. Jack X is still a fucking dope combat racing game that is far better than it really has any right to be. Daxter is an average title that is a standout on the PSP, and The Lost Frontier is my tried and tested definition for lame and mediocre. I'm not even kidding when I say that either. You've got no idea how many times I'll look at a bad game and think to myself, is this better or worse than The Lost Frontier? So, at least it's good for that, I suppose. But anyway, I had so much fun revisiting these games for the first time in 5 years to give a fresh, updated perspective on everything, and I hope you enjoyed it too. If you did, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and share. I'm Square-Eyed Jack, and I hope you have a great fucking day. Thanks for watching.
We've got to find a place to put down. This eco-storm is getting worse. According to this, we're near the brink. The edge of the world should be somewhere right below us.
Why did I go on this crazy quest with you guys? Find Eco, save the world. I wanna go home.
Listen, if we can find a new eco-source, we may be able to help. Besides, I need to learn more about eco if I'm ever going to become a sage.
Relax, Dax. Could be worse.
It's worse.
Oh, eco-pirates. They have the frontier for helpless travelers.
Oh, we're not helpless. Dax, get on the gun.
Aye, aye, sir.
Hang on!
They've caught us!
Terribly sorry for the inconvenience. Please allow us to relieve you of your eco.
Nobody has eco anymore.
No doubt why these storms are growing worse. The world is tearing itself apart. We're on a mission to find more eco and stop that from happening. Ah, the last of the brave heroes. Well, out here it's every man for himself, and we take what we can. You get nothing here. On the contrary, it seems I have stumbled on the world's most beautiful treasure.
You landed on the wrong Hellcat, pirate.
must have shot us. Yeah, that's what happened.
Like it or not, we're going down. We've run out of eco.
Worse than that, we've run out of world.
Brink.
Aside from a few dents and holes, this baby can still fly.
If we can find more green eco fuel, and if I can repair the power cells the pirates shot.
What?
While I work on that, why don't you boys go scout around and see what you can find?
What? All those crazy trigger-fingered, fashionably dressed pirates running around? No way.
I'm sure you'll manage. But Jack, you can't transform anymore.
I know. Something's wrong.
If you can find some green eco, I'll have everything ready when you get back. You might need this. It's a fighting staff I've put together. You can even attach gun mods, if we can find any out here.
Look what I found. This crystal seems to be full of green eco, and it's warm.
This is amazing.
What? Let me see. Are we rich?
This crystal is acting like an eco prism. It's slowly taking dark eco and converting it into green. If I could speed that up. I've got an idea. Okay, the crystal is hooked into the fuel relays. I've added a power condenser to focus the output and a couple of loop circuits to stabilize the eco flow. If this works, we should be able to run on this baby for a long time.
Everyone, cross your fingers.
You know, I've never been able to do that.
Oh yeah, now we're in business.
You realize we just found a way to convert dark eco into green? Do you know what this means?
Well, it means we may be able to create other colors of eco.
Maybe, with a little research and the right tools.
Looks like our swashbuckling friends are at it again.
We need to help that airship, Jack.
Buckle up.
Impressive flying, friend. I am Duke Skyheat, leader of the European people and protector of the sacred eco.
I'm Kira, and this is Jack.
Thank you for helping us deal with those dreadful vagabonds. Ever since we began looking for the eco core, the pirates have increased their attacks on us. I am surprised to find anyone out here flying solo.
The eco core.
Yes, one of the famed and mythic sources from where all eco flows.
Oh my goodness.
Happy to help.
Well, do make yourselves comfortable. The enemies of the Sky Pirates are most certainly our allies. I noticed your ship is quite damaged. Let us escort you to our grand city, Europa, where you can get repairs before you continue your quest. Welcome back. I trust your stay with us has been enlightening.
We're still a few answers short.
And I have questions for you as well. For instance, why are you out here on the brink?
We too are looking for a new eco source to help save the world.
Noble pursuit. Perhaps we can be of some assistance. It is called the Eco Seeker, and it is said to point to any major eco source. We hoped it would help us find the eco core. Alas, we're unable to make it work.
Let me try. I have certain abilities.
Yes, I've heard of you, Jack. You may be on the edge of the world here, but stories do reach us. Chancellor?
I can't do it. Too much power. Darkness everywhere.
If you don't mind, I'd like to study. You see, I'm training to become an eco sage.
Very well. I will grant your request on one condition. That you prove to us you can protect the Seeker Orb at all costs. Agreed?
Agreed.
Then go and face the danger course. If, by some chance, you beat it, the Seeker will be yours for a week.
Jack?
Dax.
happened to me?
Dax, not now.
You have proven yourselves true worth, as our ancestors warned us. Dark Eco is a dangerous weapon not to be trifled with. I hope with this, you can find the more fair Eco.
I do! Sky Pirates!
Hey!
Thank you all for your kind assistance.
Kira, no! Kira! I'm going after you. Come on, Dax.
Slow down, Jack. You just left some of my short fur behind.
I've got Phoenix's ship on the scope. He's not gonna get away that easy.
So it's just you and me, Jack. A gentleman's game of fox and hound. But ask yourself, which is which?
Jack, don't! It's a...
He's headed for those falls.
We got him! Like shooting fish in a waterfall barrel.
Sorry, old chap, but the first rule of gentleman's combat is there are no rules.
Wow! Serious piratage!
It's a trap.
You're lucky I like you, Jack. Normally you'd already be a ball of flame. Shoot his engines and let him land. The hard way.
You start easy, don't you? Just as I thought. You've been touched by the darkness.
Oh, how did
I know Dark Eco and I see it, son. And I can see that you saw what I saw when I said I saw it.
Huh. Okay. Who are you?
Good question. I know a lot, but I don't know that.
What are you doing way out here?
Wow, that's true. I didn't know that either.
Do you know anything about these dangerous robots out here?
Yeah, a bit. I made them to help me on the island, but they turned against me.
Whoa, you made those robots?
There's something wrong with your ears, son. Here's a made, and each one of them is now good to the titanium bone.
Well, if you're good with mechanics, my ship could really use...
Son, I took a look at that ship of yours. The fusion rods are shot to Shiloh without a little juice. Well, you're stuck here with me.
Time to eat. Come on. Come on. Wake up. Come on.
fix the plane.
Maybe, but I need a Valonian power pod, and there's only one of those babies on the whole dang island.
Tell me where it is, and I will get it.
Start on.
Despite years of critical acclaim, the Jak and Daxter series that was created by Naughty Dog, in my personal opinion, still does not get the attention it deserves looking back. The technical prowess showcased by harnessing the full potential of a console, well documented to be difficult to work with, wasn't truly matched until the end of the system's lifespan and even into the next generation of hardware. And yet, Precursor Legacy set the bar in 2001. Oh my god. Even shifting the series into the open world trend still allowed for some phenomenal and memorable locations to come to life for the player to explore. So, in celebration of this series, today we'll be ranking every single Jak and Daxter level. A solid 82 levels from worst to best. But it's important before we begin to establish some ground rules, as this series spanned multiple different genres across its lifespan. Our primary objective is to discuss the beloved and not so beloved locations of the series at large. Thankfully, it's not a large series like some of the others we've previously ranked, with only 6 titles. However, our focus is on the core platforming run-and-gun action these games are known for. So for that reason, the pure racing title Jak X will not be included in these rankings. Now, for a lot of these locations, linear or open, there are clear, distinct boundaries. But when it comes to Haven City being a sprawling open-world map, thankfully, this can also be broken down into some very clear and distinct areas, so that we can review each of these as their own spot on the list. Some of these places do appear across multiple games, so as usual, we are only looking at unique levels, meaning that unless there are any drastic changes to the layout or design, these will be counted as a single location. The smaller landmarks within these levels will be treated as a part of the broader map, and any transitional areas which are not part of any one level will just be ignored for the sake of simplicity. The goal here is to be as unbiased and fair as humanly possible, which is why I've worked hard to focus on the core structure, mechanics, and design of each location, as well as looking at the different objectives that fill these levels. But when it comes to open world games with such a deep narrative presence, I will also be taking into account how these levels fit within the grand scheme of their games. So, with all of that criteria out of the way, the only question remaining is, what is the absolute worst Jak and Daxter level? That prize goes to number 82. Europa from the Lost The great thing about this series is that there really isn't much of anything truly terrible to get through for the most part. There was certainly mediocre, but never anything genuinely trash. Aside from Europa, the bastardization of this series is showcased expertly here with a claustrophobic, suffocating hub location that completely fails at any form of design. And no, you can't blame this on being a PSP game because trust me, we will see some amazing PSP levels down the line. I can appreciate the aesthetic they were going for, and the music here is actually gorgeous. But everything else is a mess. For such a small map, it sure is crowded with these Easter egg hunt side missions, but they're just so awkward without any unique landmarks, and when you enter the danger course, oh my god, this is just pathetic. There is no flow, no thought put into any of this course, and no coordination when you reach the only parts that are actually dangerous. And it's awesome to learn the mechanics in this tutorial that never show up again throughout the entire game. And that's absolutely all this place has going for it. We're introduced to this like it's going to be our central base camp for the entire game, but before you know it, you're participating in the slowest chase scene ever, and it's over with in a matter of minutes. There is not much else I can do to translate to you just how bottom of the barrel mediocre and depressing this place is. You think you can understand based on what you've seen, but no. It is the definition of lackluster. Just missing out on the lowest spot, we have the volcanic crater from Precursor Legacy. A shockingly early start for this game. I'm sure you're all wondering how I could do such a thing. But if you can hear this image, then you know why it's so low. There is nothing to say about this place, because it has nothing. The previous villages had an abundance of challenges and things to see, but all we get here is the Red Sage's hut, surrounded by rocky cliffs, and these painfully slow minecarts that you really have no choice but to sit and wait for. All of our collectibles are simply purchased instead of earned. And listen, the miners are funny, but they can't save this level, okay? They can't even dig a gem out of a cave, the useless bums. Such a shame to see this amazing title so early on in the list. In at number 80, we've got our first Haven City district with Maintown. And I'd just like to mention again that there isn't much bad in this series, but there is a lot of mediocre. And that is certainly the case when it comes to this commercial, high-end part of the city. I mean, it's fine. The design and layout gets the job done, and I was always intrigued by this large temple-looking thing, but none of it gets used. That's the big issue with Jak 2, is that the missions are heavily weighted to only half of the map. The only times we actually visit this place with an objective is during the race against Errol through the map, and the second time we have to save lurkers from the Crimson Guard transports. That and the Ratchet and Clank sign is all this location brings to the table. Up next is another stinker from Lost Frontier, the big finale at the end of this game. Now we're just going to count this entire 3-part thing as one spot, because it's just so bad. Phase 1 is a boss battle against Skyheed, who is jacked up on Dark Eco, and let me tell you, this is so boring. There's no strategy. Just avoid his attacks, direct him to touch some stuff and hurt himself, or just very slowly use your guns, because that does actually work despite what Daxter tells you. Daxter doesn't shut up, but I guess that was an attempt to mask the lack of any music or sound design here. Phase 2 is another one of this game's trademark slow chase scenes. The mission text says to kill Skyheed, but that couldn't be any less true when the real objective here is just to survive. Have fun figuring that out. And when you finally get through all of that nothing, Phase 3 is a final showdown where you're just flying around shooting at shit and getting shit shot at you. It sucks. Prior to all of this is a detour through Sector 0. This game takes place on the brink of this world that lays unfinished because the precursor rats got bored, I guess. Well, Sector 0 is just some whirlpool in space that just so happens to be nearby. It does not fit in at all. The only thing that happens here is you very, very, very slowly descend into the vortex, avoiding the various junk in your way, and after reaching the bottom, we're greeted by Skyheed's ship for another showdown. Even though this takes place before the finale, this is still just another showdown the same as all the others we've seen previously in this game. It's riveting stuff, especially when you have to explain it. I can read your boredom through the screen, so let's move on, because we're only halfway through the bottom 10. Oof. Welcome to New Haven, a new and modern district built on top of the dirtiest hole in the city during an epic war after a huge palace collapsed beside it. For God's sake, this area of the map does not fit in with the tone or timeline of this game whatsoever. It's home to Freedom HQ, which needs defending, but otherwise, nothing of note takes place here over the course of this game, so again, there is very little to comment on. Going back to Jak 2, we can see the very similar Gardens location. This is an incredibly small part of the map that again is only seen for the Errol race and rescuing lurker missions. But because it does drastically contrast the otherwise harsh industrial theme of Haven City, it does stand out as a district that could have introduced a lot more variety to the game if it had been fleshed out further. Maintown, the Gardens, and the Bazaars make up half of this world, and all three are simply never used. Split in two, the Western Market areas are open and mostly transitional, while the Eastern Market bridges Maintown and the industrial area with a raised highway. Fuck this highway. It's just irritating every single time. We live in a world of hover cars and yet we still get locked in traffic? Between missions, I swear, there is never a soul on this thing, but if you're in a high-speed chase and desperately need to get through here, you're shit out of luck. Thankfully, we do have a few key moments take place in the streets down below. We find the mysterious tent, which is home to Onan and Pekka, as well as helping Ashland to kill metalheads after a surprise attack. Once we reach Jak 3 during the war, both the Gardens and Bazaars have been overrun by metalheads. Now look at this place. It's pretty cool and always fun taking the hoverboard and platforming above the river, destroying Dark Eco, especially standing on the vents and getting catapulted all over the place. But like most of these at the bottom of the rankings, that's really all that happens in this location. The layout was built around this one mission and couldn't really work for anything else, unfortunately, turning what should have been an awesome battleground into a mere transitional location. Now, this next mission technically takes place within a grander location that we'll be seeing later on in the video. But even by Lost Frontier standards, this is bottom of the barrel garbage, so it stands on its own. After exploring an abandoned weapon barracks, we find ourselves defending our friends from 3 giant missile towers. Good fucking luck. These things are covered with guns that will blow you out of the sky, but you've got no choice but to fly up alongside to destroy the targets. It's so aimless. I've never seen an epic battle lack any involvement whatsoever. Then finally a missile is launched and Daxter, somehow, warps onto the missile and has to disarm it in one of the most clumsy quick-time events I've ever seen. This is so poorly done, and as it seems to be with this game, the lack of sound design is just indescribable. Finally, Daxter takes control as we slowly steer the rocket back to destroy the tower. Have fun doing this exact same process again and again for the 2 remaining cannons. Praise the Lord for checkpoints after each missile you successfully destroy, because all you do here is get obliterated. And on that lukewarm note, we're through the 10 worst Jak and Daxter stages. The good news is that we're also through the absolute worst this series has to offer, or what little of it there was to see. But we've still got a way to go before we reach the truly good stuff, so let's keep pushing forward with level number 72. The Phantom Blade. After some fighting back and forth and assuming it doesn't get blown out of the sky by a missile, our hub location for the Lost Frontier takes place on this flying pirate ship, because it's been long enough since Treasure Planet, so we can steal that, right? Sure, why not? This location sucks, but it is home to what could have been a really cool moment that was just poorly executed. Who would have predicted that? After climbing out of Sector Zero and defeating Skyhead's battleship, somehow it's still there, and now we have to hit the poop deck to defend the blade. That sounds really awesome, but the painful reality of just get in the turret and shoot really lets the wind out of your sails. All we get are waves of enemies to mow down and eventually some small aircraft to annihilate before the bad guys eventually retreat. There's not much more that can be said for this location, but when it comes to this title, we've got a lot more to get through yet. Prior to the Skyhead BS we've already covered, we travel back to the city of Europa, only this time we're greeted with a war zone. Buildings are destroyed as we have to scale the rooftops to make our way through. It's weird to think that there is just a giant exposed dark eco vat just casually in the middle of this place, but whatever. It's not long before we find ourselves face to face with a dark eco mutant. Nothing new or out of the ordinary, aside from the fact that this asshole is a tank and refuses to take damage. Seriously, just look how aggressive this thing is, and we're given no room to fight it either. How is anyone supposed to focus on this? There is no clear strategy that I can find, and when it breaks free, it somehow gets even more overpowered. Getting stuck on this part is just expected of any fool sad enough to play this game through. Like me. I mean, at least there is something to do here beyond god-awful Easter egg hunts, but it's really not much better. Earlier on in the game, we need to travel to the volcano on Brink Island in search for a missing piece to the Eco Finder. Still in competition at the time, Captain Phoenix challenges Jak to a race and then just disappears. Good start. This actually resembles a more classic Jak and Daxter level format next to all of the aerial dogfighting as we make our way to the top of the volcano, taking out enemies, platforming and using some eco powers. There is actually some tension here brought in with the music and seeing the earth crumble around you, but it's still just as uneventful and mediocre when you look back on it and realise that it was only included to pad out this lame entry in the series. Usually by now, the levels we'd be seeing at number 69 would be pretty nice looking back on previous Every Level Ranked episodes, but here we are, still battling through the lackluster as we return to Jak 3's Metalhead Zone. Right before the game's finale, we make our way through the city protecting Torn, who drives a bomb through the front door of the Metalhead Tower. This should be a really cool moment and level to follow, but it's just so generic, slowly walking our way through shooting things with the most overpowered weapons in the game. It's not fun, especially when the map features assholes coming out of assholes, which is a pretty good summary if I'm being honest. Ew, why is it breathing? There is no use for any special abilities here, and within 5 minutes, you're at the top facing Cyber Errol, and then everyone escapes in the nick of time before the head explodes. Really? That's it? It was over before it begun. There was a real lack of inspiration that went into this place, and it shows. Ugh. Let's seek some serenity from all of that junk in the Rock Village from Precursor Legacy. Yes, Claw-hurling boulders down at you beats messing around with dark makers and metalheads any day of the week. This is a stronger hub area next to the volcanic crater we saw at 81, despite still being a simple location. It's where we meet some fun characters like the gambler, the warrior, and the geologist, but I love the visuals here. Looking out over the water to see the underwater elevator, hopping across the little rafts. But when you actually get the chance to have a good look at the design of this place, I really wish we could have seen more of it. The area we get to explore is actually the basement to what looks to be a town sitting up above on a higher cliff. That is so cool, and I wish we could have had access to this area for a unique level. Again, there isn't much to do around here, but it's still very memorable looking back, especially with that breezy tune filling your ears. And speaking of breezy, it's time to introduce Daxter, the PSP exclusive of the franchise, all about bug extermination. Riveting concept, but this is actually a pretty fun game. Orange Lightning starts in the rankings with a decent, albeit pretty tame vehicle stage. Here in Breezy Valley, we've got to spray the infected plants and fly around chasing after these metal bugs. It looks so nice and vibrant with cliffs and waterfalls, but in saying that, it does feel quite closed in and small, with very little interest. Later on in the game, we've got a very similar style level in Emerald Isle, which is a lake with rocky tunnels and caves. The missions here are actually worse in my opinion, with an awkward vehicle bombing and an on-rails turret segment, my favourite, but the actual location itself is just slightly better. You wouldn't even know it just playing through the story, but if you actually get in to explore this place, you can find this amazing hidden cliff area which is surprisingly the most detailed part of the map. And by following the path leads you to a geyser that launches you back into the main area. If we'd seen more of this intricate design here, then this may have appeared much higher on the list. When I first saw the light in the sky above the events of Jak 3 as a kid, I never would have expected to eventually be playing 2 dumb levels on board that thing. The first time we see inside the ship, we're in control of some Darkmaker robot which bears a scary resemblance to the mech suit seen in the previous game. What that means is a sequence of tired puzzles, if you can even call them that, held back by a lack of any actual mobility. Thankfully, on our second visit to the ship, right before the big finish, this features a lot more running and gunning action, absolutely wiping the floor with these all-powerful beings. It's also cool getting to use some of Jak's special abilities, even if it's only brief. The ending here is great though. After the planetary defense weapon blasts that thing out of the sky and Cyber Errol escapes in the terraformer, the duo have to escape while the entire ship crumbles around them. An awesome moment to set up the final act of the game. Another moment that lands just as well takes place in the abandoned research rig of Lost Frontier. Trust me, this is cool. We enter to find a dark eco-testing facility, just the same as the one where Jak was tortured by Baron Praxis. It's a very neat callback and helps to craft this story of wrongful dark eco experimentation. The rest of our time here is spent solving teleportation puzzles and defending ourselves from the dark mutants and spiders as we platform from the laboratory into the caves. Outside, we can see this place actually has a decent design, suspended on the cliffs of a waterfall on the edge of existence. But, as we all know by now, the aerial combat missions here are not worth writing home about. For number 63, we've got the construction site. In Jak 2, this place only serves purpose for a single, crucial cutscene in the game's later moments. Rumour has it, there were greater plans here that were ultimately cut, but thankfully, the level reached its potential in Daxter, where we get to glide down zip lines, bounce around on netting, and structures to navigate. This game really does a good job at making the world feel massive in scale, and you really start to feel that while exploring here. The second portion of this map, hanging around waiting to spray some bugs, is really boring, but when we return later on in the game, the platforming challenge has been stepped up with more interesting combinations of mechanics, like climbable walls, moving platforms, and using the spray gun to fly around. The mildly open area at the end has some hives to destroy, and I wish we'd seen more of that from this location. Overall though, this is a fun map to play through. The